Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction with, of course, Bequaline Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, in the home of Black news and, of course, African centered news and information. Glad to be back, family. You know, I'm repping, as you all know, the reigning, defending national champions, none other than of course, Ohio State University. Definitely want to give a shout out to my home state and now, of course, living in Columbus, hometown of the Ohio State Buckeyes for going through the first. But Haru, appreciate you. The first, of course, for 12-team playoff and coming out victorious champions as always. Once again, give a shout out to the Ohio State University family, the home of course, unanimous consensus, baddest team on the planet. Of course, the undefeated, well, not undefeated, but undisputed consensus and unanimous national champs. If you're watching, family, just make sure we hit the subscribe and like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit that notification bell for future likes, future videos as well. Of course, we got a great show this evening where we're going to be discussing why all the smoke for Dr. King. Got an idea for this show from But a Snapshot Reviews all the way over in Jolly Old London in the UK across the pond. We said he thinks it'll be a great show to actually discuss this issue and why we tend to find a number of individuals taking issue and umbrage. But of course, the Rev.Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we can't mention Dr. King without mentioning Coretta Scott King. Of course, as African people, we believe in duality. So we definitely want to make sure that we show her the proper and due respect for the work that she did as a sister in the struggle as well. So once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com and Bequaline Network, the home of African Center News and Information. South Central Compton and Watson House. G-Rock, appreciate you, brother. Hopefully you could tap in sooner rather than later. The link is, of course, in the description. And then, of course, we'll put the link in the chat momentarily. We look to have a great conversation this evening. And, of course, we want a lot of course, audience participation and feedback. That's what makes the show great. So once again, family, if you're watching, this is, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, and, of course, Bequaline Network, the home of African Center News and Information. And, of course, we're repping the reigning, defending national champions, the Ohio State Buckeyes. You all have never seen me do a show with a hat on, but I'm going to do a show with a hat on, maybe for the next week or two, just to rep, of course, my home state, hometown, the Ohio State Buckeyes, which I am an alumnus. So many people say, wow, you're rooting for the team. You didn't even go there, but I actually did. And just for those of you who do not know, if you are a young man who grows up in the state of Ohio, and you happen to play football, it is the dream or the goal, of course, during your childhood, to play for Ohio State, right? To put on the silver helmet for, of course, the Buckeye Leafs. And so, of course, we know that isn't there, of course, germane to the conversation we're having today. But just want to put that out there, a little nostalgia regarding my childhood growing up in the great state of Ohio. OH, of course, you all could provide a virtual IO. So just very quickly there. So, family, what we're going to do now is we're going to get into some of the ground rules that we have here at Lumumba Speaks. And then what we're going to do, we're going to make sure that we get the conversation started. But before we do so, family, I want to give a special thank you and shout out to Brother LMA, who dribbles down in VA, Brother Sandman from, of course, Philadelphia to Illadale, and then, of course, Brother D1 Beats. These brothers, of course, were able to provide some donations to lead us to, of course, restart our streams. And many may be unaware that, of course, on YouTube, using YouTube is free, but to actually stream live, of course, and have people come in and be part of the conversation, we have to use a streaming service. And so we would definitely appreciate Brother LMA, Brother Mr. Sandman, and, of course, Brother D1 Beats. And we'll be putting out a statement, of course, on YouTube, thanking them publicly as well, in written form regarding their contribution to Lumumba Speaks and, of course, Bequaline Network. With that said, family, we do have some core rules, foundational rules here at Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network. First and foremost, diversity of thought is welcome, irrespective if you're on the left, you're on the right, or you're right down the middle. We enjoy people coming in and being part of the conversation. We have, of course, different thoughts. We believe that that's how you learn and grow, not only intellectually, but even as an adult, as a person, to have people challenge your viewpoint. But we want to make sure that in having that conversation, which could be rather contentious at times, but of course it's going to be intellectually driven, that there are no racial epithets, and of course no epithets of any kind are allowed on the platform, on the channel. This is a space of Black empowerment. We believe in the 3 N's of Black power, which of course are self-respect, self-defense, And last but not least, of course, self-determination. So this is a space where we're going to respect our people. We're going to respect who we are as African people. And we do not allow epithets of any kind on the platform. As you all know, I am a scholar. I am a doctor. And so this platform is a representation of me. And so if I was to allow that type of behavior, untoward behavior on my platform, what would that say for, of course, my professional aspirations and career? It would be unbecoming. It would be a bad look. And as you could imagine, it could cause particular employers or higher education institutions to want to distance themselves from me. Number three, facts over feelings, family. So if we're having a conversation, you disagree with someone, make sure you attack the argument and not the person. Now, at hominums, we are in grade school. This is a bit junior high to attack the person, not the argument. So we want to make sure you attack the argument, not the person. And of course, last but not least, no fundamentally false statements. Shade Black Power, right? So you could be of the prevaricating belief that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time. But if you were able to make the claim, that's an argument you can make. You can make that argument because that's your opinion. But if you would make the claim it's because Michael Jordan only won 2 championships, that is a fundamentally false statement. Now, of course, I have to interject and correct you there. So, and last but not least, family, our mission here at Lumumba Speaks and Big Line Network is neither to exonerate or vilify, but to challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. So, with that being said, family, once again, Sister Shy, peace, sister. Hope you're doing well. You're here in Columbus as well. Hope you can tap in and be part of the conversation. We know we're repping the home state, the Ohio State Buckeyes, because we're national champs. But brother, once again, the brother from the UK sent me an email asking me to do a show on this particular issue regarding, once again, we like to call it the smoke for Dr. King. Many would argue it's just blatant disrespect for Dr. King. And of course, we saw this maybe in the past 2 years. B. Simone, I think she was being interviewed, and she kind of just had this emotional rant about Dr. King and how he wasn't a leader. And she called him the N-word, all types of not, foolishness. Many would argue that maybe she was triggered because of maybe personal issues in her life. However, irrespective of that, many people saw it as being extremely disrespectful. Maybe a week or two ago, Sexy Red. We all know who Sexy Red is. No need to even discuss, right? But she's known for, of course, her brand of ratchet feminism. And took photoshopped or a picture of her, and of course, Dr. King. Of course, Dr. King's daughter, one of his daughters, came out, took extreme umbrage with the picture, and of course, I guess Sexy Red was trying to infer that Dr. King was a philanderer, and so therefore, she, if he was still alive, or she was, alive during his time, she would be able to engage in, of course, intimacies with, of course, the late great civil rights icon. And so many would argue, and then we even saw a cascade of videos on social media regarding women choosing between making a pick of Dr. King over Malcolm X. And this pick wasn't due to political issues or religious or even ideological reasons, but due to the belief that he was about them hoes. And I'm quoting what many of the women said on the videos, that he was about those hoes and that's why they would want to be with Dr. King. So I make the argument that what we're seeing here, in my opinion, is a lack of political maturity, unwillingness to be incisive, and to do actual research, right? This leads many of us to fall for the same tricks of yesteryear, particularly COINTELPRO. We know COINTELPRO sought to undermine Dr. King's work and influence due to his infidelity, and of course the prevaricating tale of him being with white women, having orgies with white women, etc. Many have argued that, of course, he was cheating on Coretta Scott King with white women. Of course, there isn't any evidence to substantiate that. Many became aware of Dr. King's infidelities due to his second in command, Reverend Ralph David Abernathy. He kind of spilled the tea in his autobiography, and the walls came tumbling down. Of course, that's a play on the story of the fall of the city of Jericho in the Bible. And this, of course, his autobiography was written in 1989. But also, I would argue, it represents the underlying contempt that many Black women have for Black men, right? We know Dr. King, irrespective of what you think of him, his political beliefs, his tactics and motives, and even his religious beliefs, he made the ultimate sacrifice. That's not something many people are willing to do. Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, of course, in his seminal text, argues seminal text solutions for anti-Black misandry, Blackness, and Black male death, the Black national turn. He argues that the Black gender code war is an extension of matriarchy. Dr. King refers to this having developed during slavery, and of course, Black women's shift in worldview after the influence of feminism in the late 1960s and the breakup of the Black family are mostly, of course, according to Dr. Johnson, a byproduct of policy. But he argues policy has socialized Black women to assume leadership in Black families and communities, but many ignore how the status came to be driven by these policies, right? And as a result, they tend to see Black men as subordinates, right? Worthy of dishonor and disrespect, and that they're only able to engage in any type of meaningful, functional way of living through poverty, drugs, limited opportunity, and of course, many Black men we know have been socialized to be athletes, entertainers, or criminals, or of course, prison laborers, right? So, family, we're gonna put the link in the chat here. Want you all to tap in, be part of the conversation. Once again, if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And of course, the Beacon Line Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home of African-centered news and information. And of course, we're having a conversation regarding why all the smoke for Dr. King. So definitely want you all to tap in, family, be part of the conversation. Timothy Taylor, Dr. King's secret FBI files and audio recordings will be released in 2027. He might lose his holiday and get canceled. Okay, why do you say that? Why do you make the argument that he may lose his holiday and get canceled? Once again, the link is in the chat. The link is in the description. Tap in and be part of the conversation. I want to know why you believe his holiday will get canceled. Is it because people will see that his politics were particularly radical? What would that be? Also, I tend to find it rather disconcerting that many of the people who critique Dr. King haven't actually read any of the things that Dr. King wrote, right? They haven't read Dr. King's 1967 position paper on Black Power. They haven't read, of course, his autobiography. They haven't read Letter from the Birmingham Jail, or even, of course, one of his more seminal texts, Community of Chaos, Where Do We Go From Here? So I tend to make the argument that many of the individuals who, of course, critique Dr. King and his politics and his work have a surface level understanding of what Dr. King stood for. And of course, that we know was a result of, the master narrative. Go in on King. So Michi X, someone says Michi X went in on King. So yeah, if you could tap in, Pastor John, be part of the conversation. We'd love to hear what transpired, what was said regarding Michi X and Dr. King. But as I stated before, we tend to find a lot of individuals have a surface level understanding of Dr. King and his politics and his work. So definitely want to hear from you all. Yeah. Absolutely. So tap in, be part of the conversation. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Definitely want to hear from you all. To the young African youth in America who have no knowledge and history of struggle, all they know is I have a dream, study, research, and learn before you judge. I was there. Shabaka, appreciate that. Once again, you can tap in, be part of the convo if need be. If you like, definitely would love to hear from you. Yeah, but I would agree wholeheartedly. That tends to be an issue, right? They don't know much about Dr. King. We're talking about falling victim to the master narrative, what, of course, Dr. Woodson called miseducation, right? And this tends to play a critical role in why we have typically a misunderstanding of Dr. King and, of course, his work. Dr. King's wife went to Congress requesting them to push back the FBI files in 2027, because in my opinion, she didn't want to be alive to have to answer to her children. Interesting. I hope you can substantiate that claim. The reason why I make that claim is Trump actually signed an executive order, of course, opening up the files during his first administration, and it wasn't done. So I would argue that maybe the reason that was done because of course it incriminates the United States. She basically said King normally sold out the Black community by preaching integration and how it adversely impacted Black business. So yeah, so once again, I would argue that that's a simplistic argument, right? Michi X basically said Dr. King sold out the Black community. So I think that's a simplistic argument, right? Dr. King wasn't the only integrationist. There were integrations before Dr. King. A great example would be Frederick Douglass. Another example would be T. Thomas Fortune, right? So there were a number of integrations even before Dr. King. But the argument that one was making that Dr. King was fighting for was equal rights, right? Equal protection under the law. And many people may be unaware of the fact that even in Dr. King's last speech, of course, when he was in Memphis working for, of course, they were dealing with sanitation workers, right? he argued, he told them to put their money in black banks, right? Right. Go to the black churches, put their money in black banks. So I think it's an extremely simplistic perspective regarding Dr. King, what he stood for. Like I said, many individuals who are making these arguments, how you haven't actually, really dug deep to understand what Dr. King stood for, what he was fighting for. Dr. King had an understanding of black internationalism, what many people call Pan-Africanism, right? Dr. King visited the gravesite of Marcus Garvey when he was in Jamaica, right? He talked about Garvey being the only black man who was able to create a mass movement that taught us to be proud of who we were and honor our history and heritage, right? Dr. King in the March of 1957, and maybe 56, please forgive me if I'm of course, missing the date, the year, was in Ghana with his acolytes, right? Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, etc., to, of course, help celebrate Ghana's independence as the first sub-Saharan African country, right, to gain independence from European colonialism. So the argument that one is making, right, I keep recall when I was able to read Struggle for Black Equality by Harvard Sitkoff, who, of course, was the former head of the department chair of history at University of New Hampshire. And in his book, I have it behind me here, he talked about that Dr. King, when they started the Montgomery bus boycott, the argument they made was that Dr. King came back at the meeting with, of course, the white city fathers and leaders in Montgomery, Alabama. They said this is an issue of power, not morality. So once again, many of these individuals, of course, are unfortunately, they understood that Dr. King, and of course, his politics is rooted in, of course, a master narrative that is service level in nature. Another thing people are unaware of is Dr. King pushed, once again, Dr. King pushed and advocated for, of course, legislation, right? So we're talking about the Civil Rights Act. We talk about Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. King pushed for legislation to ensure African Americans had equal protection under the law. So it's far more than simply trying to integrate someone's, of course, dollar store or, of course, restaurant. So this is what some of the prevaricating tales that many make about Dr. King that, of course, is short-sighted, to say the least. But family, once again, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. The link is in the description. Tap in, be part of the conversation. We want to hear from you all regarding why all the smoke for Dr. King, the disrespect for Dr. King. What are your thoughts on that? And what can we do to, of course, address this issue? Of course, I think Mr. Shabaka stated, unfortunately, a lot of our young brothers and sisters have no knowledge of history of the struggle. We know the African proverb states that the ruin of a nation begins at home to its people. And so I would make the argument that, unfortunately, many of our young people aren't being properly educated in the home, right? In the home. And as a result, they have no sense of course, our identity, no sense of the struggle that we've had. And of course, I remember I was talking to a brother who was from Ghana, but of course he was raised here. And so, he didn't have, of course, what we call a distinctly African worldview or mindset. And he used the N-word at the gym. And I said, hey, don't call me that. He said, oh, you're one of those. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And of course, he didn't want to elaborate. So we tend to find, unfortunately, and this may be an issue that's generational in nature. I'm quite sure when I was a young buck, I may have even, spoke in such an ignorant manner that having self-respect as a Black person, as an African person, is seen as unbecoming for some reason, right? So, yeah, show on King felt counterintuitive as she was put up to do it by white conservative handlers. That may be the case. Oftentimes, I don't know Michi X. I'm making the presumption based on, of course, your comment that she may be conservative or right-leaning. But what we do know is there are two types of Black conservatives. You have the organic Black conservatives who actually believe that conservative values will benefit the Black community. A great example of that historically would be one Booker T. Washington, right? Another example would be Condoleezza Rice, right? However, what we tend to find nowadays are inorganic Black conservatives. These are individuals who, of course, as Brother Pastor John stated, typically are put up by white conservative handlers. Oftentimes they're paid, they're sent to think tanks and taught what to say, how to say it, etc. And of course, of course, they benefit financially. They're able to ingratiate themselves with white conservatives, and they benefit financially from doing so. But also, we find that on the left as well. Many Black people, of course, are taken to think tanks and, of course, groomed and schooled in terms of how to push the leftist policies or Democratic Party policies as well in a manner that we think maybe addresses some of the surface level, puts a Band-Aid on the issues that Black people face, but does actually get to the root cause to solve the problem. So Timothy Taylor says, if the FBI files have proved Dr. King had a drunk orgy with a Black and white prostitute, Black women going to counsel him. Rev.Dr. Abernathy's claim and FBI files were like align with each other. I see. Well, of course, Abernathy in his book, and I actually have the book behind me right here. The walls came tumbling down. He actually states that he never saw Dr. King with white women, just of course black women. And I think I even highlighted the section in the book where he discussed this. Is around the 400 section, 400. So let me see if I can find that here. And then I can read it out. 90% of black men are conservatives, but they vote Democrat. So Timothy Taylor, so there's a big thing. There's a difference between cultural conservatism and political conservatism, right? So there's a big difference there. And being culturally conservative doesn't align with being politically conservative based on the politics, the policies, what we're talking about here. So, but once again, tap in, be part of the conversation. Yvette Cornell, ADOS has served on the boards of several white conservative groups. He's a share without question. She's a share without question. Understood. So let me see if I can pull this up here, where they discuss his infidelities. Here, see, public knowledge of him as a person. But yeah, tap in, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the description. I definitely want to hear from you all regarding this issue. So another thing people don't understand is that, as a womanizer, right, is that the mainstream civil rights movement was seen as too radical, right? For, of course, the left, the right, and the left, and it was, of course, black organizations such as, of course, Nation of Islam, Black Panther Party, etc., that led, the powers that be to actually say, hey, we need to work with them, or we have to go. The alternative is, of course, these Black Power organizations. So just something to consider. But yeah, this is from, of course, Reverend Ralph Abernathy's biography, The Walls Came Tumbling Down. So he argues here, I was exhausted at that stage of the evening since I was a happy goer. A friend of Martin's invited us to have steaks at her house. 3 of us, Martin, Bernard, Lee, and me. When we got there, we found 3 ladies waiting. Martin's friend had provided dinner partners for Bernard and me, and we had a very heavy meal along with some light conversation. This is page 434. I was exhausted at that stage of the evening, and since I was a happily married man, I was not particularly interested in developing a close relationship with my companion. Nor was Bernard Lee, as best I recall. Well, I remember trying to keep up my part of the conversation during the meal, and then when the women went back into the kitchen, beating Bernard to an easy chair with an ottoman and falling fast asleep. When I awoke, I saw an empty living room, except for Bernard stretched out on the sofa. Shortly thereafter, Martin and his friend came out of the bedroom. The other women had long since left. It was after 1 a.m. We drove back through the rain, which hadn't slackened all evening. Solomon Jones leaned forward, occasionally wiping off the windshield, which was clouding up on the inside. We didn't talk, and by the time we drove back into the motel parking lot, I had long since fallen asleep again. Martin, on the other hand, never took cat naps and never ran out of gas. So he goes on. I said I would go with him, so Bernard went off to bed. When we got to AD's motel room, we found that he was not up. AD had a couple of drinks, and there was a white woman with him. So this is, of course, AD, not Dr. King that he's referring to. But there was a black woman in the room as well, a member of the Kentucky legislature. And she had clearly come to see Martin. They had known each other before. Their relationship was a close one, knowing that someone would be with Martin to watch out for him. I spoke to the woman, then excused myself and went off to bed. When I got back to the motel room, I left the door unlocked so that Martin could get in if he needed to, though I didn't necessarily expect him. By then it was almost 3 a.m., and I was asleep before my head had sunk into the pillow. Sometime between 3 a.m. and dawn, I believe another young woman Martin knew well must have slipped into the room looking for him, but had not found him. Between 7 and 8 a.m., Martin came upstairs, maybe because he knew this young woman had been expecting to see him the previous evening. He stopped by her room. I don't know what he told her, maybe that he had gone to bed early, which was technically true. Whatever he said, she knew better and told him so. Obviously, she had a few other things to say as well, because when he came back to our room, he was visibly upset. She's mad at me, he said. She came in this morning and found my bed empty. I opened one eye and quickly closed it. Ralph, do something. I need you to help me. Call her and see if you can straighten things out. I tried to go back to sleep, but he begged me, so I sat up, cleared my head, and called her. She answered on the first ring, and she sounded wide awake. I tried to ask her how she was, but she let loose a storm of abuse. Don't you call me trying to fix things. It's partly your fault anyway. Why don't you tell him not to behave the way he does instead of trying to cover for him? Then she called me a couple of names and hung up. What did she say? Martin asked. I told him, and he shook his head. She's really mad at me this time. I agreed that she was and got dressed. Right? So he talks about the womanizing, but he he states that he never saw him with white women. And even when he was interviewed after, of course, he wrote this in his autobiography, he said he never saw Martin with white women. So that's just something to consider. Timothy Taylor, every single governor in Mississippi from 1876 to 1993 were Democrats. That means Democrats was hanking out people and terrorizing our people via the KKK, Jim Crow. Yes, but also Republicans were in on it as well. We do know that Republicans played a pivotal role in supporting the Compromise of 1876, right? That, of course, led to, of course, the, as historian Rayford Logan talks about, the nadir of race relations in America, in which black people had no rights whatsoever. We also know that after, of course, LBJ signed that legislation into law, all these civil rights acts, many Democrats left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. So this is something to be aware of, but this isn't a political party issue. We know both political parties are white supremacist organizations. So something to consider as well. Both political parties supported, of course, apartheid in South Africa. Both political parties, of course, supported colonialism in Africa. Both political parties supported COINTELPRO. Both political parties have supported a number of policies and initiatives that were detrimental to the African community here in America. But once again, if you want to have that conversation, tap in and, of course, be part of the conversation. Of course, the link is in the description, and, of course, the link is in the chat below. Let's see here. Frankly, I don't care if King was with 5 white women in a hot tub full of marshmallows. It still doesn't take away his sacrifices for the movement. I would agree with you, Prester John, 100%. See, 1960s, Shabaka says, I was a militant young brother. I didn't agree with King, but we still supported him. Understood. Yes, sir. Hopefully you could tap in and be part of the conversation, because once again, you stated you were around during the time. Ralph Abernathy sold Martin out after his death. Ralph and Jesse won the King's place. Would definitely love to hear why you believe Ralph Abernathy, and of course, Jesse Jackson sold out Dr. King. Definitely want to hear from you there. Why do you believe they sold out Dr. King? Once again, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation, family. You're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always being a Black, along with Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, here on YouTube. And if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, and hit that notification bell for future updates and videos. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation. I want to hear what you all have to say. Many, of course, have made a number of claims and statements regarding this issue, and I want to hear from you all. Of course, I don't want to talk too much. You all know I have to gift the gab. But tap in, family, be part of the conversation. We're discussing why all the smoke for Dr. King. And very quickly, family, you do not have to cam up, and you do not have to, of course, use your actual name. You could use a pseudonym to be part of the conversation. So once again, you do not have to cam up. Keyword, you do not have to cam up to be part of the live stream, right? So Timothy Taylor says the only prominent Democrat who switched to Republican was Strom Thurmond. Democrats lie about the party switch. Even if you change your political party platform, you are still responsible. But once again, there were a number of Republicans who, of course, Democrats who moved from Democrat to Republican Party, but that's not the nature of the conversation that we're having here. We're talking about why all the smoke for Dr. King. So we want to make major things major and to make sure we're focused on the issue at hand. As I said before, both political parties are white supremacist organizations. And if someone is serious about Black empowerment, politically, socially, economically, and otherwise, one would, of course, would admit that and understand that irrespective of which party you're dealing with a white supremacist organization. And so the goal politically would be to bet on Black rather than red or blue, right? And we also know, if you ever get the chance to read the book, American Society, How It Really Works, that both political parties are funded by the same special interest groups. Literally, both political parties are funded by the same special interest groups, the same lobbyists, the same, of course, multinational Fortune 500 companies and corporations. So the reality situation is what we see on television typically is wrestling. It's WWE, it's Monday Night Raw, right? This is, of course, it's a show, but it's not rooted in the reality. So there's something to be critical of and cognizant of what we're talking about, because this is a space where we believe in Black empowerment, not red empowerment, not blue empowerment, but Black empowerment. So this is a place where we cape for either Democrats or Republicans. This is a place where we advocate for African people at home and abroad by any means necessary. So once again, family, Tap in, be part of the conversation. If not, we're going to have to close things out. Don't want to do that. Once again, to be part of the conversation, you can use a pseudonym to protect, of course, your anonymity. And you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation. You do not have to cam up. Keyword, you do not have to cam up to be part of the convo. So, Preston John, I would love to hear from you. Timothy Taylor would love to hear from you on this issue. Shabaka would love to hear from you on this issue. And of course, Brother LMA, Mr. Sandman, D1 Beats, hopefully you all can tap in as well and be part of the convo. I want to hear from my brothers and sisters regarding why all the smoke for Dr. King. I would argue, I think Brother Shabaka summed it up best, right, regarding why this is an issue. And it's rather extremely disrespectful that we tend to find our young people having such disrespect and ill regard for individuals that made the ultimate sacrifice so that they can have, right, the freedoms and liberty that they have today. Right. I understand that, brother, but once again, that's not the issue that we're talking about on this show. We're discussing why all the smoke for Dr. King. We're not talking about Trump. We're not talking about immigration. We're not talking about Democrat or Republican. We've done a number of shows on those issues, and that's not something that we're going to relitigate at this time. We're discussing, of course, why all the smoke for the Dr. King Jr. And of course, we know we can't mention Dr. King without Coretta Scott King. So once again, family, definitely want to hear from you all regarding why all the smoke for Dr. King. All right, so tap in, family, be part of the conversation. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com and, of course, Speak Online Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home of Africa Center News and Information. And as you know, we're repping the reigning defending national champions, of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes. You know, I had to give a call to Dinah Samir because he, of course, was always talking trash after after we lost to Oregon. And of course, it was a nail biter of a game, came down to final seconds, ran out of time. And of course, Ohio State quarterback Will Howard slid, and of course, the clock expired. I got a call from him quick, fast, in a hurry, right? So you better believe when we won that natty, I gave a call to Dinah Samir. So definitely want to make sure that we are cognizant of the fact that, of course, Ohio State are the reigning, defending national champs, right? We did it, brought the title home, first national championship in 10 years. And, you know, many people are saying, and I'm one of them, that we're going to go back to back, right? In the voice of Magic Johnson, back to back. We're going to go back to back, and we're going to win 2 natties in a row like Georgia did. And we're going to stamp our make a rather demonstrative statement, authoritative statement that we are the dominant program in college football. So once again, Brother LMA, appreciate you. Brother LMA said he's going to tap in, says give him a minute. But once again, Pressure John, Timothy Taylor, Brother Shabaka, Sister Mary Shy, come on now. I haven't heard from you in a while. I haven't spoken with you in a while. I want you to tap in as well, be part of the conversation. Brother Haru, tap in, be part of the conversation. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. We're talking why all the smoke for Dr. King. Why all the smoke for Dr. King? So want to hear from you all. Why all the smoke, the vitriol, the animus, the disrespect for Dr. King, for the Rev.Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then I have, of course, an update that I can share with you all as well on the platform. But yeah, this is a particular issue, and so we want to make sure that we address this, right? Because as I stated before, the majority of the individuals who do not, of course, critique, have a rather vitriolic critique of Dr. King, have a very simplistic, of course, understanding the rendition of who he was, his work, his activism, his politics. And of course, I'm not an integrationist. Many of you know I am a Pan-Africanist, red, black, and green to the day I die. However, I do take issue and umbrage with individuals making claims about Dr. King that are averse to facts, right? Rather simplistic in nature. As I stated, many individuals have not read Dr. King's position paper on Black Power. In fact, many are even unaware that he even wrote a position paper on Black Power. And many are unaware that Dr. King stated that we suffer domestic colonialism, like our brothers and sisters in Rhodesia, in Zimbabwe, right? Many are unaware, have not read his letter from the Birmingham jail. They have not read, of course, Community of Chaos, Where Do We Go From Here? They have not read his autobiography, which I have behind me here. And so I think that's one of the issues. There's not much to talk about Dr. King. Trump has made Fannie Willis and that's right to get him locked up. Trump's actions on Dr. King's observances political payback. Don't know what you're talking about here, but once again, this conversation is about Dr. King. So if you don't want to discuss the issue at hand, we'll bid you a good night. So once again, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. Waiting to hear from you all regarding why all the smoke for Dr. King, for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, we can't mention Dr. King without mentioning Coretta Scott King. First off, also family, once again, we talk about COINTELPRO, because we are aware due to the Freedom of Information Act that, of course, the FBI director at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, would send tapes to Coretta Scott King of recordings of Dr. King having sex with other women. They did this because they wanted her to out Dr. King as, of course, an adulterer to undermine the work that he was doing in the movement. Many would argue that this is another example. Appreciate it, Brother Timothy Taylor. Appreciate that rendition of that. And of course, one of the major issues we find is individuals falling, of course, for the same trick as before. Brother LMA, I want to appreciate you tapping in. As I said before at the top of the show, Brother LMA was one of the brothers who were able to generously give a donation so that we could get Lumumba Speaks and Be Quran Network back up and running. So, of course, he's one of our resident, of course, analysts here at Lumumba Speaks and Be Quran Network. How you doing this evening, brother?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me? You okay, Doc?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, good, man. Glad to have you back. Happy New Year. So on the topic, and like I said, I'm not as well read on MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., but I can definitely see and understand, not necessarily that I agree with it, but that, I definitely see that he does not, he gets a little bit of smoke from the community, but I think it's a kind of a confluence of issues adding to it. Like I believe one, kind of like what Carter G. Woodson said about like I said, the miseducation of Black people or African Americans. If you think about like what Malcolm X said, only a fool would let his enemy educate his children. And so I can definitely see that Martin Luther King being a radical, that you don't want people to follow in his footsteps, so you can't deny his impact, but you can basically mischaracterize it, lie through omission, reduce them down to just a simple, that one line in one speech, at one rally. So I think that plays the biggest part. And two, like, us being in America, and most of us getting our education from, especially our education in terms of who we are from, the dominant society, of course they're going to say it, they're not going to put enough emphasis on it. It's going to be boring, because I remember when I was, in high school, not high school, but, high school, elementary, Black History Month was Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and George Washington Carver. Like that was your Black history. You know what I'm saying? So of course, if you get the same Martin Luther King work packet every single year, and they leave out such critical information and it's not put into context, of course, growing up, you're not going to have a certain type of respect for Martin Luther King. And I think that that's like the main issue. Like, I guess, because, especially us in our generation, we don't understand how bad it was back in the Jim Crow South, or just Jim Crow in America, or just pre-civil rights America. We just don't understand how bad it is. Like, we don't know what it means to be walking down the street and have some white man call you the N-word. You know what I'm saying? Or, your uncle or your mom or your dad or whatever just gets lynched and there's no justice, right? There's no one you can call. Like, we don't understand what that feels like. So when, we're told, like, as children, and you're just given this kind of generic, non-specific, kind of bland, boring packet about Martin Luther King, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not putting him into context, and two, I think, like I said, this is another thing that I think is kind of, unfair to him, but it's also unfair to like the rest of the basically the pantheon of Black struggle and Black liberation and Black thinkers, is that he's like becomes the focus to the point where everybody else is kind of drowned out,
Right.
you know. And it's almost like what's the word I'm looking for? But you know that phrase where just like, you know, the media just talks about one person all the time. And that person may be a great person, but over time you kind of get tired of hearing about them, right?
Saturation.
So,
right.
Was that
saturation?
Saturation? Yeah, I think that the media oversaturated with Martin Luther King. And, you know, even to me, at one point, I kind of wish that, you know, it was called, you know, almost like Civil Rights Day, rather, or Black Civil Rights Day, and we commemorate everybody rather than just hyper focusing on, you know, because like I said, once you get outside of Martin Luther King, you start to see, and I'm not saying that Martin Luther King was radical, because, you know, obviously if you get past that one line and that one speech or that one rally, you know, Martin Luther King had some relative, you know, some radical positions. But if you look at the other, you know, some of his contemporaries in that time frame, they will set this place on fire, you know. So I think that there's a kind of a hype, you know, the dominant society wants to hyper focus on this kind of bastardized version of MLK to kind of, it's almost like focus on Martin Luther King, but don't focus, you know, how come we get a Martin Luther King Day, but we don't have a Malcolm X Day? You know, we don't have a Marcus Garvey Day. We don't have a Dr. Amos Wilson Day. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like they want to hyper focus on this one particular person. And like, and if you don't have the background to understand, you know, his Martin Luther King's significance, you know, then you can become jaded and kind of tired of the whole thing. And 1 second, brother, I gotta switch over real quick. Hold on.
No problem. And brother Shabaka, hopefully you could tap in. He says Dr. King was locked into nonviolence. He made a tactic, a principle in the statement. If everyone in America becomes violent, Martin Luther King Jr. would be nonviolent. He made a grave mistake. So I'm going to push back there. I think that's one of the misconceptions about Dr. King. And of course, you were around at the time, but I'm going to be citing Dr. King and of course what he said in his autobiography when he was having a conversation with a young Stokely Carmichael, also who we know and call the great ancestor Kwame Ture. And he stated that the philosophy of nonviolence, of course, Satyagraha that he got from Gandhi, was to be employed when they were engaging in political action, right? Nonviolent direct action. But he told Kwame Ture, this is not an issue or a question of should you pick up a gun if someone tries to break into your home. So he wasn't a pacifist. He simply believed in nonviolence in terms of when advocating for engaging in political action. Right, but not as a philosophy of life. And as many people were aware, you know, Dr. King had armed bodyguards for his family. Right, so I think that's one of the misnomers about Dr. King as well.
And to that point, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, I hear you just fine.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, when he talks about, you know, just nonviolence, and I kind of lost a bit of what you were saying. I was switching over to my Bluetooth, so I caught like the last tail bit of what you just said, but it kind of goes to my point, violence, right? So, and it almost becomes like a messaging thing, right? So if you hear the whole nonviolence thing and you don't hear the part about it, this is nonviolence only when we're talking about political speech and making sure that we get our point across, not to defend yourself. You know, and that gets lost in the sauce. Then people can come away with this idea that he just wants you to, you know, take this ass whooping with a smile and then don't defend yourself, you know.
Right.
And I think that
wasn't the case.
Right. At all. Right. And then when I
can pull up that section in his autobiography. So give me 1 second here.
Yeah.
Here we go. I got it right here. So go right ahead, brother Elevate.
Yeah, and then like I said, you juxtapose him to Malcolm X, who is, you know, any means necessary. Like I said, then people can kind of draw the conclusion that, you know, he just wants us to just, you know, basically take it with a smile, not realizing that, this is just a strategy. You know, it's better to, you know, because even like if you're in a debate, even if you're like, you know, like I say, you know, German such as yourself, if you're debating someone like Charlie Kirk, yeah, you can beat his ass, but at the same time, you want to beat his ideas, right? Because if you start spazzing out, now everyone's gonna, you know, all your ideas just go out the window, right? So to that point, I can understand that, you know, yeah, you got to keep your cool. You got to show the world that, you know, they're the violent ones, not us, right? And you know, like I said, to that point, you know, and I have to give it to him because that's tough, you know what I'm saying, to go out there and not fight back. You know what I'm saying? Because he's a man just like the rest of us. He wants to fight back. He wants to, get his lick back. But at the same time, he knows that if he does, then he's going to undermine his entire movement.
Right. So I'm going to read an excerpt from Dr. King's autobiography. This is on page 316 and 317. This is where he talks about a meeting. This section is titled "Disappointment Produces Despair, and Despair Produces Bitterness." And he talks about this is after James Meredith was shot by a sniper during his march against fear, right, in Mississippi. And he argues, once during the afternoon we stopped to sing, "We Shall Overcome." The voices rang out with all of the traditional fervor, the glad thunders and the gentle strength that had always characterized the singing of this noble song. But when we came to the stanza which speaks of black and white together, the voices of a few of the marchers were muted. I asked them later why they refused to sing that verse. The retort was, "This is a new day, and we don't sing those words anymore. In fact, the whole song should be discarded. Not we shall overcome, but we shall overrun." So we see this rise of militancy coming in the civil rights movement. But he also talks about a conversation he had. So as a result, this immediately aroused some of our friends from the Deacons of Defense, who contended that self-defense was essential and that therefore nonviolence should not be a prerequisite for participation in the march. They were joined in this view by some of the activists of CORE and, of course, SNCC. So we're talking about CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, and, of course, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I try to make it clear that besides opposing violence on principle, I can imagine nothing more impractical and disastrous than for any of us, through misguided judgment, to participate a violent confrontation in Mississippi. We had neither the resources nor the techniques to win. Furthermore, I assert that many Mississippi whites from the government on down would enjoy nothing more than for us to turn to violence in order to use this as an excuse to wipe out scores of Negroes in and out of the march. Finally, I contended that the debate over the question of self-defense was unnecessary, since few people suggested that Negroes should not defend themselves as individuals when attacked. The question was not whether one should use his gun when his home was attacked, but whether it was tactically wise to use a gun while participating in an organized demonstration. This is on page 316 and 317 of his autobiography. So we find that this tale, this prevaricating, this apocryphal claim that he was a pacifist and you could let people to smack you around was not the case whatsoever. And once again, I'm reading directly from Dr. King's autobiography, page 316 and 317, the excerpt from the section, "Disappointment Produces Despair, and Despair Produces Bitterness."
Yeah, and like I said, but that was, and that was what he felt, but the message that came across, not by his own doing, obviously, right. His legacy is through the lens of white supremacy, and they're going to try to make him as this little passive,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but like I said, it's just, it's also messaging is also just, just stuff just gets lost in translation all the time, right?
Right. And one of the reasons why Dr. King is, of course, promoted to the pantheon of Black leadership, as the paragon of Black political leadership, is because he's someone that white people are able to mold as an individual, as a form of acceptable resistance to, of course, white hegemony. It's that simple. This is why they always mention Dr. King, and he loved people, and Yeah, we got to go much deeper. I was having a conversation at the gym this morning. I was training a brother, and he was talking about he's a Christian and all this stuff. And I said, well, you do know that there are scriptures in the Bible that promote bigotry and all these type of things. He's like, no, it doesn't. I said, yeah, it does. I said, it's obvious that your perspective of Christianity is based on a master narrative. And you haven't actually read the text yourself. Right? And so we see a lot of this is just due to people being intellectually lazy. Right? Yeah. And so as a result, they refuse to actually read and study and learn for themselves. And as a result, they allow themselves simply to be guided or misled by individuals that they, of course, have put their trust in.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And like I said, it's I think it's a lot of things that, a lot of misinformation that just, that his legacy has been, like I said, pushed through this lens of white supremacy. And we're getting, like I said, a neutered, distorted view of Martin Luther King.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, the guy was up against, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to lie. Like, I had some harsh, and it wasn't necessarily harsh, but it was more or less of, like I said, it's the idea of, like I said, nonviolence. And, but I had to realize that was just the a tactic, right? You know what I'm saying? And he said it himself, like this, we can't win a fight, like we cannot, obviously, you know, uh, 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 this white guy has, uh, not mastered, but he is, you know, very well versed in the art of violence, right?
Well,
So he would look.
but real quick, if I could interject, he was simply stating in that march they didn't have the capacity to wage a successful violent struggle because I mean they were already being Wesley sniped from both sides of the highway.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
No, no, fair point.
and that's what he was speaking to. He wasn't saying that we should, like he stated, this was not an issue of if you should defend yourself if you're being attacked as an individual. He said, but we should not engage in violence when we're engaging in political action.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
But family, once again, tap in, be part of the conversation. You're watching, of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative in which we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, along with, of course, Bequeline Network, the Pan-African social media, Short and Air, and the home of African Center News and Information. And we're here with our esteemed guest, colleague, I could say colleague, because he is a contributor, and of course, he's contributed in a number of ways, particularly financially, to the show, to the platform. Brother LMA, who dribbles down in VA, of course, and as you can see, but I'm repping that OHIO because we are the national champs.
Yeah, I saw that, man. Yeah, congratulations.
Absolutely. But once again, family, tap in, be part of the combo. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. You do not have to come up to use to tap in and be part of the conversation, and you can use a pseudonym if you want to protect, of course, your identity. But we're here to discuss why all the smoke for Dr. King. Why all the smoke for Dr. King? So let me ask you this question, Brother LMA. We tend to find a lot of Black women, young Black women, are the ones really making headlines with their disrespectful comments and views regarding Dr. King. Why do you think that is the case?
Going back to his, and I don't know whether or not he was unfaithful to he engaged in infidelity. I'm not sure.
He was.
I don't.
He was.
I mean, yeah. I'll
Like
leave it at that.
Rob Abernathy, his second in command, talks about. He detailed it, of course, in his book.
Yeah.
The walls come tumbling down. I have the book right here.
Okay, but
yeah,
anyway,
he talks about it in detail on page 434 through page 436.
Yeah, but to that point, I mean, I'm not one for infidelity, right? So, and I know sisters have been.
Though, but we ain't gonna get into
that.
I said I heard you was a player, but we ain't gonna get into that.
Oh yeah, I was a player back in the day. You know what I'm saying? I broke a lot of hearts back in the day, but no, I'm kidding. But anyway, but no, Black women have, said for generations how they hate a cheater, how they hate, the feeling of infidelity, blah blah blah. So I can definitely say it's a sensitive topic for a lot of Black women. And so to hear that, someone that they may have once revered,
right,
engaged in that behavior, yeah, it can sting because, like I said, I think that some people see that type of infidelity as a character flaw, and it's kind of like if I can't trust you, and I think that girl said, B. Simone, like if you can't be faithful to your wife, why should I be why should I expect that you to be faithful to this movement? You know what I'm saying? So I can see the argument that sisters would make. You know what I'm saying? Like no one wants to be cheated.
It's a false equivalency, but one has nothing to do with the other. But
say that one time.
It's a false equivalency because one has something to do with the other. But
yeah. Well, I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Like okay, put it this way. I mean, it could be anything that let's say I'm not saying him, but let's say any political leader or thinker or whatever, he has his public life and then he does something that people will met, in his private life. You know what I'm saying? To try to separate the two, I mean, you can, but one is going to bleed over into the other, or your private life is going to bleed over into your public life. That just is what it is, right? And obviously, depending on the severity of the severity of whatever it is, your indiscretions in your private life, can really, like think about, R. Kelly, think about Bill Cosby, for instance. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously I got some issues about with some of those claims, but like, Bill Cosby, he was wilding out. You know what I'm saying? But should that take away from the good that he did? Some people say no, some people say yeah, but people say like, okay, if you did some things in your private life, you should still be held accountable. And that's with anybody. Anybody, if you do something outside of your public life, you know what I'm saying? whatever you do in your private is going to spill over into your public life. And like I said, a lot of sisters feel a certain type of sensitivity, and I can understand that because, like I said, if you have a lot of, and I'm just talking about just a stereotype, if you have a lot of black men who are known for being unfaithful, I think that the act of being unfaithful cuts deeper than just personal. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like I think it cuts deeper, and to find out that someone that you revere as supposed to be a representative of black manhood and all this other stuff, he engaged in this behavior. I think it could cut deeper than and some women may not have the maturity or restraint to express themselves in a their anger may come out in a way that we may find disrespectful. But like I said, it's women. Black women have always said how they felt about these types of things, infidelity, especially in the black community. So it doesn't surprise me when I see some women taking shots at him because of his alleged. I'm gonna say alleged because I didn't read the book, but I'm gonna say his alleged infidelity. So that's just me. Like I said, I understand. I can understand. I wish, and I would never ever say that it doesn't happen. But obviously you should refrain from being unfaithful, especially particularly to your wife. And like I said, I wish he would have understood that. Hey, if you doing dirt like this, can this shit gets out, it can tarnish your whole entire movement. Because like I said, imagine we find out years later, but let's say this happened, instead of, let's say they assassinated him, this blew up, and like they actually had the proof, they had the pictures, they had all this stuff, and they released it to the public. What would have happened to the movement had that been how it ended? You know what I'm saying?
That's one of the reasons not Dr. King, Malcolm X took such extreme umbrage and issue with Elijah Muhammad's misgivings.
Yeah. And so
we're moral leaders. How do we,
Yeah, and I do, and I guess that's what I was saying about like your personal and your public life is that this. I mean, you can make an argument that infidelity is a moral issue, right? I mean, depending on how you look at it, it could be considered a personal moral issue. But if it's a moral issue, and then you're doing this, and then you're trying to tell us about, you're making these speeches about racial equality and all this other stuff. I mean, that's an easy, I mean, that's a fish in a barrel for white supremacists to take shots at you,
Right.
But like I said, I so I can understand why sisters would take umbrage at the fact that, if, like I said, if he was unfaithful, and there's good evidence to suggest that he may have been, yeah, I can definitely see sisters, not fucking with it.
Right. And I understand completely as well. I do understand, like I said, as unbecoming. And what we want is for our people is that we want to be consistent holistically. We want our personal behavior to, of course, align with our public behavior. Right. This is what we want. It's called consistency, right? We call it being self-determined in all aspects of our life, right? Unfortunately, many people struggle with that, right? But I think we can take from Dr. King and learn from those mistakes, right? And of course, not engage in the same behavior moving forward, right? And we see this even politically. Oftentimes, you have individuals who are running for office, rather prestigious office of significant public importance, and then some type of issues will come out regarding their personal life, and before you know it, they have dropped out the race.
Yep.
Right. So something to consider there as well. So one would say one has nothing to do with the other, but unfortunately, we live in a world and society in which it does have something to do with the other. And so unless you are a billionaire who, of course, is promoting white supremacy, you can't become a politician of any significant stature, and you're cheating on your wife and sleeping with porn stars and paying them off with taxpayer money, etc.
Yeah. So, like I said, I had some feedback. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I get it, but like I said, I think that and that's with anything. It's almost like in politics or whatever. When you run for office, all of your dirt is going to come out. You know what I'm saying? And I think that was the environment that he was running in. Like, I mean, he wasn't running for office, but he was running for the hearts and minds of America. And like when you get into that political realm, like, that opposition research is going to, come hard, and they're going to do everything they can to sully your name. And if you give them ammo, whatever ammo you give, whether it's public or private, it's going to be used against you. So, I mean, like I said, it's definitely unfortunate. But like I said, I'm still willing, I'm still going to like give him his respect. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, just put it as a footnote in, his legacy. Make it put it as a footnote. You know what I'm saying? But I yeah. It's and like I said, and that's the main thing too. Like I kind of wish that, like I said, if we had more, if we what's what I'm looking for? Exalted other, what I'm saying, civil rights leaders, other thinkers and leaders, and like I said, it would take some of the pressure off of him, so that because like I said, you can have other political leaders, black leaders that also did some, saying some unbecoming things, but like the spotlight isn't on them. You know what I'm saying? So, but not that I want to suggest that they didn't. I hope that no one else did. But at the same time, I wish there was, like I said, a bigger spotlight that kind of take the entire movement. Like I said, the whole, civil rights movement was not wrapped around one man. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It was a whole, like I said, he was significant. I give him that. You know what I'm saying? He became the front man, whether he wanted to be that or not. He did, he got put into that role, and that's where he's at. But I definitely wish that we would, bring more people into the fold.
Absolutely, absolutely. Once again, family, we're kicking in with Brother LMA this evening. Tap in, be part of the conversation. You're watching, of course, Lumumba Speaks, the Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe to gain competitive advantage by always betting on Black. And, of course, Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire in the home of African-centered news and information. And as you all know, real quick, family, I may be moving to a different time zone. So once things are official and locked in, I will give you all an update on that information. But we got some things in the works right now. But it looks like I'm going to be leaving Ohio.
Hey, what's Ohio's rivalry? It's not is it Michigan?
We call it them the team up north.
The team up north. Sorry, yeah. You're not moving up north, are you? Because that would be a tragedy.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, travesty. Oh, that's funny. You go right off the whole state just on one football team?
Well, you got to understand, brother. Like, have you seen the movie Creed 2?
I have not.
Okay, so there's a scene where Michael B. Jordan's character, Adonis Creed, wants to fight Drago's son, right? Mm-hmm. And Rocky says, "Don't do it," and he says, "Why?" He said, "Because he was raised in hate." See, being from Ohio, I was raised in hate. I was raised to hate pitching. I was raised to hate them, literally, not figuratively, literally. And so I was raised, indoctrinated, brainwashed to believe that the entire state is irredeemable.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, sir. I'll leave it at that then.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah. So once again, family, if we don't have anyone else willing to tap in, we may leave. But I mean, some of you may have saw Brother Timothy Taylor. I used to term brother loosely. Wanted to, of course, discuss Trump. This issue. We're talking Dr. King, and so we tend to find that on a number of occasions. Individuals come in and kind of want to, move the conversation in a different direction. That doesn't happen over here. I stand 10 toes down. As you all know, I'm not a lightweight, literally or figuratively. I'm a heavyweight, literally and figuratively. And so when we do a show on a particular topic, we're going to discuss that particular topic, not what someone else wants to discuss, right? That's not something that we do here. And so, of course, as you know, here we bet on Black. We don't bet on blue. We don't bet on red. We don't bet on the red, white, and blue. We bet on Black, of course, and our colors are the red, black, and green. So anything that we discuss is going to be based on what is in the best interest of Black people, not what's in the best interest of promoting the talking points of a particular political party, particularly when these political parties are both white supremacist organizations. So just something to consider, family, that you come here, you tap in, you want to be part of the conversation. We're serious about, of course, Black empowerment. We're not someone who sits up here and cosplays Black power, but actually is promoting talking points of a particular white supremacist organization or political party. So that's something to consider. The second issue, if you don't know who I am, my name is, of course, Dr. Picard K. Lumumba, and I'm a legitimate PhD, right? I didn't go online to some nondescript, unaccredited institution and gain my PhD. I'm an actual doctor. My dissertation is online. And if you all like, I could put that link of course, in the chat for you all. So it's just something to consider there. But I'm someone who lives my life lockstep, of course, in alignment with the principles of Pan-Africanism, and of course the ideas and opinions of course, Marcus Messiah Garvey. So if you have any issues with that, this is not the place for you.
Hey, Dr. Lumumba, I have a question for you. Do you think, I guess, with the orange one in office is talking about releasing the files, whatever FBI files they have on
Yes, sir.
Dr. Martin Luther King? One, do you think that they'll actually release it? Two, do you think they'll release it with like a bunch of heavily redacted, or you think?
I think that's a great question. I think that if it's released, there'll be a lot of heavily redacted, of course, information. The second issue is Trump, Trizzle. He signed an executive order doing the same thing during his first administration, and information wasn't released.
Okay,
So
I must have missed that.
I don't think it would happen.
Okay, I must have missed that the first time around. Yeah.
So no, I don't think it would happen. And the reason why I don't think it would happen is because it would incriminate the United States in the assassination of Dr. King. That's why I don't believe it would happen.
No, because the lawsuits would be flying, left and right. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I don't think it would happen. And part of this, of course, I would argue he's doing things that he knows. For example, when he first came into office, first administration, he signed an executive order banning people from Islamic nations. He knew that wasn't going to fly because it was unconstitutional due to, of course, freedom of religion in the Constitution, right? When he banned, when he tried to overturn birthright citizenship, he knew that was going to be overturned because birthright citizenship is guaranteed in the Constitution based on the 14th Amendment. So, of course, it's all political theater, if you ask me. Political theater. Okay. Yeah, that's just my opinion, though. It's not a statement of fact. Family, well, listen, Brother LMA, I'm gonna let you close things out. Any final thoughts?
No. Glad to have you back. Like I said, I know this is gonna be a period of transition for you. I hope it runs smoothly. Like I said, you're a much needed voice in this space. Like I said, it's just, a lot of times we get like very short clips, or we get very short clips and even shorter information. So I'm glad that you're here. Like I said, the community needs you. You know what I'm saying? We need strong brothers in the fight, lending their voice, bringing rationality and evidence and literature to the space. So I appreciate you, and that's it for me.
All right. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Always bet on black. Peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on black. Peace.